I think the less labels, the better. I think that gender is absolutely a construct set up by, the patriarchy to keep control under a certain group of people.
I'm so glad you could make it. Sit down, sit down. Oh, yeah. Oh, the band is gonna be awesome tonight. I dig it. I'm so glad you could make it.
Welcome back to season 4 of Therapy Sessions. I'm your host, Tasha Davis, also known as Auntie Hair Coach, and I interview everyday people telling real stories about their beauty industry journey. Today's guest is Fox and Jane Salon owner, coach at Left Brain Group, and founder of the Dress Code Project, which is a global alliance of salons committed to providing positive, gender-affirming services for LGBTQ2S+ folks. Kristen Rankin has entered the chat. Welcome and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for having me, Tasha.
Of course. So I definitely want to speak in depth about the Dress Code Project for sure. I'm just grateful that I'm clear that I have a lack of education in that area. And so I'm grateful for organizations like yours that just keep me tight so that I'm taking the best care of my clients that I can. But before we go there, I just want to actually start from the beginning. My listeners like to know who we're dealing with. So who is Kristen Rankin? Like, where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up? Did you always want to be a hairstylist? Who are you?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking and thanks for having me on your show. So I grew up in a city just outside of Toronto, Canada. It's called Hamilton. And I had 2 parents. I had a sister. I have a sister, and grew up pretty average, I would say. 2 parents that were both in the trade organizations. My dad was a butcher and my mom was a hairstylist. And, we grew up pretty modestly. And I learned from a very young age that you needed to be self-sufficient to survive in this world, and started working when I was 13. And just didn't stop from there. Put myself through college, got a college degree that I used for 5 years and then had enough of it. I think that's what happens when you go to college when you're young and kind of trying to figure it out. And then went back to the workforce to work a random job for a couple of years so that I could figure out what I wanted to do, and probably also just enjoy myself a little bit. And then decided, after talking to my mom one day, that I would go back to school to be a hairstylist because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And she knew that I was creative and she suggested it, and decided to go back as a second career for hair. And remember sitting in cosmetology school day 1 thinking, like, what the fuck am I doing here? And then all of a sudden it was like exams, and I did really well and got into the industry and have been for 17 years now.
And what's your college degree in?
Film, television.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, with a
I
major.
mean, I feel like hair could still fit in there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a film and television with a major in screenwriting.
Okay. Have you written any scripts?
Just for myself, and not in a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
But I bet that helps with storytelling now in the social media area, no?
Yeah, and I think it helps just to stay creative as well, like even if I'm not writing anything and producing it, I'm still thinking of ideas and thinking of things, and that translates into everything else that I do. So, yeah, it's definitely not a waste,
Cool.
that's for sure.
Very cool. And so mom was a hairstylist, and you never considered being a hairstylist?
No.
Like that just was not even on your radar?
No, I was very queer at a very young age. I knew that I was not straight. And I just thought, because of how hair was presented, especially then, I just felt like it was a very feminine energy world, and I did not relate. I did not feel that way at all about myself. So I kind of, the most interaction I had with it was going to my mom's salon after school and having to wait in the salon for her to be done work so that we could go home. And
Yeah.
I would sit in the
Yeah.
chairs and sit under the dryers, when they weren't on and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
the hooded dryers. But outside of that, no interest at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just an inconvenience to have to go and sit around all these girly girls talking about girly things.
Yeah, and I didn't want to feel feminine. I didn't want to
Yeah.
have that energy. And I didn't relate. It wasn't interesting to me at the time.
Yeah. And did your parents understand that when you were young?
I think
Like, when did you have that conversation with them?
probably in my early 20s, but
Okay.
I did not, when I was younger, I did not, but I don't think it was ever really spoken, but I think they understood that I was like very, as they like to call it back in the day, athletic. Um, so I was like, I played a lot of different sports. I was always playing a sport, whether I was going to a game or going to a practice or hanging out with my friends that I played sports with. Like I was pretty athletic. So I think that was how my queerness came out slightly because, the other part of being a young queer back then was also having, two identities, one that you presented to the straight world because that's what they wanted to see, and then your true self.
Yes. I have spoken to several queer people during my podcasting time, and of course, in my real world, everyone's got queer family. Um, and one thing that I think I've noticed is that there absolutely is a form of, so as a Black woman or a Black person in general, we have our corporate persona and then who you are as a person, that code switching. And I've found that that seems to be like a very common thread um, with queer people too, that there's code switching there too. And that's something that I had really thought about.
Yeah, isn't it funny that different minorities, especially oppressed minorities, and they can relate to each other, and they may be different circumstances, but like you said, the code switching, it's all the same, right? Like
Mm,
different circumstances and outcomes, and um, but it is all what you're doing to survive as a minority in some way.
sure. Okay, so talk about your cosmetology school experience. Did you do traditional cosmetology school? Did you apprentice? How did you get your education?
Yeah, I did both. I did traditional cosmetology school and then apprenticed for my hours, wrote the exam. It was a pretty standard experience. Other than like I went into cosmetology school not really knowing what I would get or what to expect, and left, feeling pretty positive and positive about like getting a job in the industry and working as a cosmetologist.
So you did feel prepared for the real world when you graduated. You got a solid education.
I mean, as solid as it could be back then. There were a lot of things
Sure.
missing, right, about it. Like, as we know, textured hair, it was never a consideration. Now, I live in the state of New York, and New York has just mandated this year in cosmetology school that it is mandatory to understand textured hair. So, there was a lot about our experiences, I think, at different times that, there were things missing. But I did finish cosmetology school and, do everything that was asked of me at that time. So, and then proceeded to learn the things I wanted to know outside of that.
Sure. Did you understand? Did you understand that you didn't have textured hair education? Did you realize that at the time, or when did you start to understand that? Wow, there's this segment of hair that I don't understand.
I think I did understand that right away because I also like, going to standard cosmetology school. The school that I went to, we learned um, pieces of things, So, for example, barbering, I was also interested in barbering. And I think we had a week of very loose understanding of barbering, how to use clippers, guards, all of those things. And it was the same with textured hair. We understood there was textured hair, but we didn't get into the depths of learning about how to cut textured hair, how to, hydrate texture hair, and, style texture hair, maintenance of textured hair. Like none of that was included. And so I think in both of those areas, I was very interested. So I think after, not right away, because you're just getting your feet founded in the ground and finding a job, and, you know, getting out of being an assistant and then being a, junior stylist. That's where I started, and when I started to get more into a place in my career where I was like, okay, I can now afford to, for various reasons, like take more classes on my own, more education. That's when I started to look into it.
Gotcha. Talk about some of your salon employee journeys. So now you've graduated cosmetology school, you're feeling positive, like, okay, maybe I could, do something here. Talk about some of your experiences in salons.
Well, I only worked in one salon outside of school. Well, two, but for the same company for under a year,
Okay.
because I just did not want to be somebody else's employee. I was not interested in it. I didn't like the culture. I didn't like the fact that there was no focus on a healthy environment, and so I sort of just thought, I'm going to try to start my own salon. And so after about, I guess, 8 months of being working for this company, I gave them my resignation. I was really upfront and honest with them. I wrote them a letter, sent it to, the company. I spoke to my manager, told them what I was doing. They took me out for a drink, a goodbye drink. And it was really nice, to be honest with you, because, I was open and honest with them, and they appreciated that. And I opened up a salon, yeah, maybe 6 months later, in Toronto, where I lived at the time. And
Okay.
yeah, and started that.
And so that was not Fox and Jane at that point, right?
No, it was not. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you get from owning a salon in Toronto to living in New York City and owning a whole different salon?
So I'd started my salon in 2008 in Toronto with the mindset that I wanted to have like a really healthy community and a different salon experience. I think 6 months after I opened it, I was able to hire a stylist, and then, kind of went from there. And within that salon, I had a rainbow sticker on the front. It was like you know, a place where I wanted everyone to come and feel welcome, and, feel like they could sit in my chair and sit in my stylist chair and get a good haircut and feel, like they were supported in the environment. And then I started, the dress code project within that salon, and from that company. And through the dress code project, I met the CEO of Fox and Jane, who's now my business partner. And I went and did some work with Fox and Jane in New York. And through conversation, a lot of conversation, for a good amount of time, um, made the switch over.
Gotcha. And help me understand Fox and Jane because I didn't realize. So I thought Fox and Jane is your salon. And then when I go to the website, it looks like they're kind of all over as if it's a chain, but it says Fox and Jane Group.
Yes.
This is like a new concept for me. I don't, what's happening there?
Yeah, I think it's very Fox and Jane of us to, be a little bit different. We're not
Hmm.
a franchise. We are not anything like that. We are a group of hairstylists working under the name Fox and Jane Group, and we work together. We make decisions together, and we just happen to have, a landing space that, where we have like really incredibly brilliant business partners that help us, with support as business owners and hairstylists that are still behind the chair.
That's such a super cool concept.
It's
So
really
can
lovely.
anyone open a Fox and Jane salon or how does that work?
Yeah, so that's kind of like outside of my wheelhouse. That is my business partner's, a circle of excellence for sure. But
Okay.
like I owned a salon in Toronto, and became a part of this company. So I think that it's definitely a possibility for a lot of different folks if they're interested. I think like with anything, it's probably like how I feel about everything. If you're willing to put in the work and the hard work and, honest work, and build something that is healthy and that you want to see thrive for yourself and for the people that work in your space for a long time, to support yourself in them, then yeah, I think that it is definitely a possibility for anyone to do anything, to be honest with you, but definitely be a part of our group. And I think that's the beauty of what we've started and what we have, is that it really is for everybody, and it just depends on, it's like, how accountable do you want to be?
There you are. You had gone out on me for a moment.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Let's talk about, so you've mentioned several times about like a focus on a healthy environment, creating a safe community. And so like I said, the dress code project is what really made me curious to go and find out who is this person who has created this. Share with us, I guess, a few things. What is the dress code project? What inspired you to create it? Um, why does creating a safe space, why did that matter to you? And what does creating a safe space even mean?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are a lot of things in that, and I break them down in a sense that, I kind of am a person that figures things out as I'm going along. I didn't know I wanted to be a hairstylist, so I went to cosmetology school, and now I'm a hairstylist, but it was all very like this flow. It was like a little bit less planned, and I think that's how things go. When I was a hairstylist in Toronto in my previous salon, I had a very, very diverse and inclusive clientele. And I had a transgender woman sitting in my chair one day, and I cut her hair. And the next day, she tweeted at me that it was the first time she'd ever been in a salon and had a haircut that made her feel like a woman. And
Hmm.
I think that if you are part of any kind of oppressed, marginalized group, you can relate to that in so many ways. And I, as a hairstylist, related to that as a queer person as well. I was a queer person before I was a hairstylist, and also a queer person who did not fully understand my gender identity or my own identity. I was always trying to figure out where I belonged and where I fit in. And so I think for me, it really resonated because, I felt like I had to identify as a certain way, when I was younger. This is where I think I fit into this label. And then as you evolve, you start to realize that labels are maybe not, a structure that has to be like so singular, And so with this haircut that I did, I thought, this is crazy to me that I work in this industry and I really love it. And there's so much good that can be done here and that is done here, but only if you identify in a certain way, and only if you're reflected in the way that the beauty industry has been set up to see you. And I honestly didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I just know that it didn't sit well with me, and I wanted I wanted to do something about it, to be honest with you. That's it. So, through a lot of discussions and things like that, I came up with this, like, how do we make this better? And then it just very much over the last 6 years has evolved to being, a group of, we're an organization that helps people understand what a gender affirming hair space can look like. And we just offer support to hair spaces to help create safer spaces that, can be, healthy and celebrate people within the queer community and their identities. And really, that's where it comes from, and that's what it has evolved to. I think the less labels, the better. I think that gender is absolutely a construct set up by, the patriarchy to keep control under a certain group of people. And I don't think gender is anything that really exists, because I think there's a lot of beauty and fluidity, and it can be celebrated in the hair world, and of course so many other things.
Yeah. It's so wild for me watching people be so rigid about gender currently. I'm turning 50 this year. I remember the 80s very well when everybody was so fluid. So it's so weird for me to see it go from so fluid to all of a sudden, this is the only way that you can possibly be a woman, or else it's weird, you know.
Yeah, I agree with
Um,
you. It's like ebbs and flows of things, throughout the decades. Yeah, like the 80s, it was just like, I felt like everything was experimental then. People were trying things out and they were sticking or not sticking, or then they were like, veering off to something different and new, and it was all acceptable in the underground culture, right? I think that, today, especially the way politics are going, and especially here in the US, things are very different, and a lot of, I think, structures that were meant to oppress communities that are not in power are being put back in place. And it's feeling much like what I can only imagine the 40s and 50s felt like.
Absolutely. I want to touch on one more thing here, and then I'll kind of move on because I have so many questions for you. So I did not, as I was doing my research and I came across it said LBGTQ2S plus. Prior to seeing that, so I mean, as recently as 2 days ago, I was still saying LBGTQIA plus. Um, what what's the difference? Why the IA is gone and now it's replaced with? And I actually did my research, so I know why, but I'd like to share that information now with my listeners.
I think the thing about our community, and there are so many communities that I think are similar to this, but I can only speak to the community that I identify in. And I think the thing with our community is that things are forever changing. Nothing is ever
Mm-hmm.
staying the same or stagnant, because we're evolving. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the other part of this acronym is to make sure that we are constantly looking at it to make sure people feel seen and visible. And that's why it's always
Mm-hmm.
changing. And I think it goes back and forth. Sometimes it started out as LGBT, you know um, and I think depending on where you are, it could be still used LGBT. Depending on who you are, you might look up what the current acronym for the queer community as a whole is and find out the answer as you did. You know what I mean? So I think it is just a very fluid acronym. The point of it is to show that you understand that this community is beautifully diverse and inclusive.
I love that. Um, I also always thought that the A stood for ally, and I also found out that was not the case. So
Yeah.
I'm,
Yeah.
we're, I feel that it's important to just at least continue to try to understand and, stay on top of what's going on. I want to go towards, you posted a reel recently. First of all, I love the vibes of your salon. All of your reels are so cute. Like,
Thank
I've
you.
never stepped foot in your salon, but it just feels very welcoming, very, it just looks like a good time. But you posted a reel very recently, and I just found it fascinating. You were wearing a shirt that said "Make abortion legal again," and I thought that. Now, mind you, I told you earlier that I come from a corporate background originally. I've been independent for 14 years, but I was corporate for 14 years. And so some things have were very easy for me to break out of, and some things have been a little more difficult for me. I love the shirt. Love the shirt.
Thank you.
Absolutely agree. And just thought that is the ballsiest thing I've seen like ever in the salon.
Oh,
Do you talk about politics behind the chair? Because, and I'm going to use air quotes and say politics, right? Because what some people consider politics are really a matter of life and death for some people.
mhm.
So my question is, do you talk about politics behind the chair? And yeah, like what? I'm just blown away by that.
So first of all, I know exactly what reel you're talking about. It was a birthday reel, and I happened to be wearing that shirt that
Mhm.
day, and did notice that it was on there. So it's kind of funny to me. But I think first I have to say that I'm a white person, and I understand my privilege as a white person, and I will use that for good if I can. And so, yes, I do wear,
Mm,
I love t shirts. I love graphic t shirts with
me
meaning
too.
and messaging. Um, I will often be wearing a t-shirt that represents a friend, like a friend of mine who has a chain of barbershops in Houston, Texas, or my own t-shirts that have the dress code project on them, or a t-shirt that is representing, something like
Love that.
pro-abortion. I have a t-shirt that says stand up for Black women. Like, I have a lot of t-shirts and they mean a lot to me, and I wear them on purpose. And I understand that I have a lot of privilege in that, because of the color of my skin, regardless of the fact that I am from a marginalized community in a group. I still have that privilege. So yes, I do wear them. And yes, I do talk about politics behind the chair. And yes, I know that it's not super appropriate. And I've never felt it more than being in America. Because I've been in America now, living here for 1 year, just over a year.
Mm.
And wow, it's so incredibly, the the vibe and the chatter, it's so incredibly different in a lot of ways. But I have noticed that I still am able to talk about politics with people, um, but I will also respect people, and their wishes. So that is also a huge part of what I consider a safer space, is respecting people that are in your space. So when I have the chance, I absolutely will. And that t-shirt is a fucking bomb t-shirt, and it was made by my dear friend who lives in Houston, Texas. Her Instagram account is at Healthy Witch, with two H's at the end of witch. Her name is Meg, and she's a freaking phenomenal artist. And she made those t-shirts. I think a couple of years ago, when women's and female identifying rights and autonomy were being attacked by the American government. And
Yeah.
I do believe that anybody who identifies as female should have autonomy over their own bodies. Definitely not religion and not government. And I love wearing that T-shirt. It's a phenomenal T-shirt. So,
No, it's a total badass t-shirt. I want one. So
well,
I'm
you
definitely
you
going
could
to
definitely
her.
reach out to her.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to her IG and see if I can buy one. No, it's super cool. Have you ever had anybody push back in the salon behind those?
No, not that anyone has said to me in the salon. I've had comments about, like, "Oh, your T-shirt," like, and I think people are pretty good at controlling their facial expressions sometimes and their comments, editing themselves quickly. I've had some of my
Hmm.
stylists be like, "Oh, I can't believe you're wearing that T-shirt," or your T-shirt. One of my stylists actually commented about the reel you saw, that my T-shirt was front and center in the reel, and I was just like, good. And you know but I've had people say things to me on the street, but you know
Yeah. No, honestly, the t-shirt, no, it was a total vibe, and it would make me want to come to your salon because I would feel safe, in that
oh,
case.
thank you, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
and the other part of it too, and another stylist that I interviewed in a previous season, their name is Olive, the
oh, the
therapist.
therapist, Olive is
I
amazing.
love Olive.
They're
I love
fantastic.
Olive. But something that I learned from watching them, I found them in 2020, when everybody was sitting at home, and I don't know that it was actually something that they spoke on directly as much as something that I just observed. Olive just being Olive. And if you were offended, you weren't going to choose that salon anyway,
No.
right? And so they were just kind of curating their salon environment. And I don't even know if it was intentional, but it was just a masterful case in branding for me as I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. Because now, if you don't feel comfortable in that salon, you just won't go there
Yeah.
and you won't have to feel uncomfortable in your own space. Yeah, I just thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
no, the t-shirt was a vibe. All of that to say the t-shirt was a vibe, and I
Thank
was just
you.
curious if you'd ever gotten pushback on those.
Yeah, not in the salon. Yeah.
Okay. So the Left Brain Group. You're a coach for the Left Brain Group, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
What is that?
So really, it's like an educator. The Left Brain Group is an organization in the industry that is trying to bring education to the industry and folks in the industry and support them in a different way. Um, I'm sure, as a longtime stylist yourself, you know that there are like really big hair shows out there that happen every year, and they're for the masses, and they're really, they provide a lot for a lot of different people. And
Hmm.
a company like the Hairbrain Group is trying to do a very similar thing, but in a more niche, more alternative, I guess, way, that's providing different education for those that are looking for it.
And is it everything? Is it color? Is it
It's
cutting? Is
everything.
it
It's hair
okay?
cutting. It's hair color, vibrational hair color. It's textured hair by the wonderful Kia Neal of Texture versus Race.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of different, and that's the thing we're trying to do, and highlight the things that like Kia is doing, that I'm doing, that a lot of like our the other folks in that community of the left brain group that are doing, that don't get highlighted, like razor cutting and vibrational color and stuff like that. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so we're kind of winding down here. I'm realizing right this moment, I knew you were from Canada originally, but I'm realizing right this moment that you've only been in America for a year. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I've only lived here for a year. I've had a connection to the United States for obviously over 5 years with Fox and Jane, and my partner is from the US. So I just happen to, I flock to Americans, it seems. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and so what are your, have you been, this is it's totally not hair related. I'm just curious because it's blowing up my timeline. Um, have you been following, like, how do you feel about Drake? You care?
No, I don't have like, I don't have concrete opinions at this time about Drake, I think, yeah,
That's fair.
I think there was a moment in time where he did really good for a city that I love, Toronto.
Yeah.
And he brought a lot of
Yeah.
good there for, in terms of who he was as a human being, and what he did, in terms of bringing that, exposure to Toronto, and potentially had some help in the success of the Toronto Raptors for a moment in time. But that is the only opinion
Sure.
I have on that human being.
That is fair. I've just been stuck on this Kendrick Lamar
Well,
versus
what can
Drake
you tell
thing.
me what you think about it? Because it's an interesting.
So, I told you I'm turning 50 this year, and hip hop music also turned 50 this year.
Yeah.
So I and hip hop are one and the same. Like we are the same thing. And you're in New York, which is
Brooklyn.
almost
I
like the
actually live in
birthplace of hip
Brooklyn.
hop.
So it
Come
was
on, man.
super cool to be here. I moved here the year that it turned 50, and it was
Yes,
amazing.
so good.
Yeah.
Um, and so hip hop, quote unquote, beef has always been a thing. So, in fact, there is a very historic, several very historic beefs happened right around the corner from you, probably. And so, yeah, there's just been this huge beef going on between Kendrick and Drake, and you being from Toronto, I know that Canada loves Drake, and of course, I'm speaking very generally.
Yeah.
And so, I was just curious if you had any thoughts on that at all.
I think sometimes Drake opens his mouth and doesn't stop to think about what he's about to say. But I also think that
Yeah,
he sees that he thinks he can do that. And I think there are a lot of people in his position that think they can do that. And I think that's why a lot of
absolutely.
these beefs get started, right? But
Yeah,
that man.
I think ego is a terrible drug.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny if
All
you
right.
you
So,
pass by his house in Toronto, because I have before, and he's just got, guards out there all the time, bodyguards out there all the time, if that tells you anything at all.
yeah. That's wild. And
Yeah.
like in Canada, I've never been to Canada, but when I think of Canada, I don't think of like a high crime rate or like,
So here's the other funny thing. His house is gigantic, and it is
mhm,
in a very, very wealthy neighborhood of Toronto. So that you literally have to have a car to get to. So
yeah,
maybe I am certain as well that a lot of celebrities, just because of social media, especially, people find out where they live. I'm sure that is
mm,
what the guards are for, but he also has what look to be like 20-foot fences outside of it. So, it's not that he lives in a neighborhood where that would be a consideration. I think it's that he is who he is, and social
Yeah.
media and all of those things. But
So weird.
yeah.
So weird. All right. So we've reached the part of the podcast that I call Story Time with Auntie Hair Coach. So I've got 3 prompts. If you would just choose one, sometimes people do all 3, your choice, however you want to handle that. But I've got 3 prompts. You pick at least one and just give us a quick short story. So the first prompt: what's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you behind the chair? The second prompt is: tell us about a time that you got to meet someone you looked up to in the beauty industry. Or the third prompt is: if you could change one thing about the beauty industry, what would it be?
I will hit all 3,
Okay.
starting with number 3. Uh,
Okay.
if I could change anything in the beauty industry, it would be that it becomes a more inclusive, diverse space for all people and all their identities and their hair types. Okay, number 2, I'm just going to go backwards now.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, what was that again? I'm sorry.
Tell us about a time you got to meet someone you looked up to in the industry.
Well, honestly, I looked up to my mom a lot, and so, that was instant. I was lucky enough to
Yeah.
meet her right away. Um,
Yes.
and she worked super hard. She was a hairstylist for 44 years. Worked in the same, did her own thing, had kids, went back, worked in the same salon for 25 years with a bunch of other, women. And she just worked super hard. And I really admired her and looked up to her for that. The other person who I was a recent meet of mine, actually, and is not in the hair industry, but I met her doing her hair, is Louise Melling, who is the director of the ACLU, and just like, I don't know, her, to me, felt like meeting a celebrity because of the work that is being put out from that organization. And I feel like all of those folks that are doing that work they're celebrities in their own right, and what they're doing to try to help save society is amazing. So,
Yeah.
um,
They're superheroes.
oh, they really are,
Yeah.
honestly, like, she is just, yeah, I don't know. I think really doing the work that needs to be done for civil liberties in this country, and so that was pretty cool. And I think I was like blown away that she was in my chair, and I think she was kind of stunned that I thought that. So it was a very interesting meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the weirdest story behind my chair was probably this Karen that I had in my chair a couple of years ago in Toronto. And I was just talking to her about pre-booking and her next appointment, because as you know, when you become a busy hairstylist, there's nothing more frustrating than when you have a client that you enjoy, you do their hair and everything, or you just are trying to help your clients understand why it's important to have a hair plan
Mm-hmm.
and why it's important to kind of treat your appointments with hairstylists like you're going to the dentist, right? Every time I leave my dentist office, I make an appointment to have a cleaning so that I don't forget to do that, right? I get
Mm-hmm.
reminders and all of that thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
had this person in my chair. It was the first time I was cutting her hair, and had mentioned it to her a couple of times. And she was kind of talking to me about it. And I was just like, we can just set it up. It's super easy for you. I say this to everyone, by the way. I'm sure, again, as a seasoned hairstylist, this is what you do, right? To prepare your books.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
she just out of the blue stood up, ripped her cape off of her neck, and started pacing in front of my chair, yelling at me why she doesn't want to talk about pre-booking her next appointment with me, or in general, or with anyone, and that she was a writer and she had very important writing to do. And it just took everything in me to continue to cut her hair the way she wanted it to be cut after that.
Relax, lady. It's okay.
Right?
You don't have to. Just don't be mad if you call me and I can't get you in
It
tomorrow.
was like a Karen moment before the Karens blew up and became Karens.
Yes. Had you done her hair before?
Never. No. She was
Okay.
a very important writer.
Okay. And never again, I'm assuming.
No, I actually chose not to offer to pre-book her appointment after that.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. There is something to be said. The moment that I realized, which surprisingly was very recently, it was in 2020. was the moment that I realized that I don't have to do everyone's hair just because they come and sit in my chair.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I just had this like all like inclusive, like, oh, you asked for service, so I must provide this service.
But
And
that's what we do as service providers in the hair industry, right? Because even though we're hair people and we're creative and we're this and we're that, we're also service providers. And I think
mm-hmm.
service providers are taught that we're lucky to be able to have the next client and to be able to afford to put food on the table and to have shelter and blah, 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 blah. And we have been trained to feel as though we don't deserve this, that we're lucky to have it, right? You know, and that's a big reason and why I try to also promote safer, respectful environments in at least my environment that I can control. And I say safer, not safe, mostly because, you know, it can never be fully guaranteed to be safe, but you can do what you can to make it safer, right? And so I promote like having respect and mutual safety for everyone that you work with. So, you know, coworkers, employee to employer, you know, all of those things. But this clients play a huge part of that as well. Come into my salon and be a decent human being. Don't be a jackass, you know? Like, be cool. Don't be a jerk. Nobody likes that, you know? I don't care
Literally.
who you are, what you do. I'm sure you don't either. You want a haircut? I want to give it to you. That's what this comes down to. If we can have a nice conversation and potentially have you come back and maybe, you know, become friends, that's even better. But don't come in here and being a jerk, because nobody likes that at all. Nobody likes people coming in swinging their ego around. It's just so uncool.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I know for sure is the way the industry is headed, you're going to have ugly hair forever because everyone's going to deny you. And we're
Absolutely.
not that big of a community.
We're
We'll tell our
not. Word
friends.
travels, you know, and that and even faster now with photos on, you know, platforms. And
hmm
it's true, you know, that's never ever a route I want to take ever, but it's just kind of like you know, you do get those people that come in, and those ones especially, the first thing they say to you is like, I've never liked my hair, and you're just like, oh good Lord. Here we go.
Red flag, red
Yeah,
flag.
right. It's just like, oh, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kristen, it's been an honor to talk to you today. Thank you again for taking time out to speak with me and my listeners.
Oh, it's been
How
such a pleasure.
can how can they find you if they want to follow your movement?
You can follow the movement of Safer Space Gender Affirming Hair Salons at the Dress Code Project on Instagram. You can follow us on our website where there's more information about more specific things at dresscodeproject.com. And my hair,
Thank you so much, Kristen. I
yeah,
appreciate you.
yeah, no problem. It's really been nice talking to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
No,
realize I
I was
cut
just
in.
my Instagram is Kristen Rankin here.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kristen. I'll see you around the IG streets.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tasha. Take care.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you could make it.
Next time on Therapy Sessions with Auntie Hair Coach.
And if we talk about it that way, we will begin to understand what is behind some of the restrictions and experiences we have with them that makes us need to create statutory law over the U.S. Constitution. Now, you have constitutional laws, but why do we need to always create statutory boundaries for them?